Hello and welcome to ShePack. Today I'm joined by Ash Wade, Executive Vice President of Global Revenue Operations at Sago. And in today's episode, we're going to discuss 40 and Fabulous, career reflections, and embracing the future. Ash, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. Is it inappropriate to raise the roof?
Hell no. Raise that roof.
Raise the roof. I love this. I'm so excited that we finally made this happen. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And what you guys don't know is I totally invited Ash and then didn't include her on the invitation. Yes, I was that person. And unfortunately, that's not my first time, but we made it happen. So I'm so excited to be here. Now, true to theme, I know you recently celebrated your Fab 40s. So for those of us who are going to soon approach the big 4-0, how does 40 feel, my friend?
40 feels fantastic. Effing fantastic, if I
may. You may.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I think there's this mental and emotional anxiety tied to turning 40. And I don't know if it's because my husband and I have decided to live child-free. We don't have that as part of our story. And if that kind of changed my feelings about turning 40, but I feel really good. I feel like I know who I am and what I want to do and how I want to live my life. And that is way more gratifying than how I felt when I was 20, trying to figure it all out, or 30, making lots of mistakes. So, 40 is pretty awesome. Looking forward to 50, 60, see if we can stretch it up to 110. We'll see how far we can keep this thing going.
Hell yeah. Well, it's so interesting too, because I feel like, when you're in your 20s, you're still trying to figure out who you are. And then in 30s, you're still questioning yourself. And it's so refreshing. I feel like at 40, hearing from you, it's, who you are, and there's no apologies of accepting, who you've become and embracing that. And very exciting times, my friend. And I'm very much looking forward to it. So I said EVP of Global Rev Ops. So tell us more about your background and that experience of climbing the ranks.
Yeah, it's so funny because I think when we're prepping to have this conversation, this notion of climbing the ranks came up, and maybe being 40 and realizing that I have a career to look back on, it just is surreal. It's really weird to think about rising through the ranks. But yeah, I've lived in sales for over a decade. I started my career in market research and advertising and consulting a little over 10 years ago. And I worked in various different roles. I like to joke that I've had a very nonlinear path to sales leadership, and that is certainly true. I have worked in account management, operations, sales operations, as a salesperson, as a sales leader. And when I came over to Sago, I was recruited by the CEO to help with some transformation that the business was looking to achieve. And he was looking for individuals with a strong sales background and sales acumen to kind of help the business get to where it needed to go. And so I ended up in this Rev Ops role, not really knowing what it was or what it was meant to do, but I'm sure thankful that I've ended up here, because I think, the world of Rev Ops is interesting and new and fast changing. And it's given me this great masterclass in figuring out how to tie together the different engines of growth across a business and find pathways to create sustainable, scalable growth. And having a sales background, having been a salesperson and a sales leader, it gives me a different lens, right? Because I can empathize with the plight of the salesperson and the sales leader, and then also the marketers and product people. And so it's been a super fun and wild ride. And I'm happy I'm here, and always thinking about what's next. But here's a good place for right now.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, like you said, because it's, I feel like when you start your career, you're figuring out, what do I want to do? What do I want to be when I grow up? And you kind of just jump in. And I love what you said, because you've had all these various roles. And then you reflect back and you're like, oh yeah, crap, I do have a story. And it may not be I always feel like we think about our career as a ladder, and it's very linear, but exactly to what you said, it's not very linear, actually. I don't know too many stories where it has been linear, and you're almost you're driving around the neighborhood, and you may even go outside of that, and you're starting to explore and get all these different experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't that seem like the process?
Totally, totally. Well, and your ladder analogy made me think back to like the old Atari. I don't know if it was Atari or Sega. My husband will kill me if I mess this up, but like the old Donkey Kong games, right? Like where he would like climb up a ladder and then cross
Oh
over and then
yeah.
climb up a ladder and then cross over and like try to avoid the falling coconuts or whatever that was. But I think I've been trying to climb up the ladder and avoid the falling coconuts for the better part of the
Yeah.
last 10 to 15 years. So yeah, I think maybe our career paths can be a little bit like Donkey Kong, but hopefully you get to play
Totally.
off at the top and learn along the
Yeah.
way.
No, I mean it's a good segue because I think as we think about those coconuts that are coming, what were some of those like challenges and stigmas that you faced as you started to advance your career?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And gosh, I feel like we can take this in so many different directions. I mean, I think as a woman, we show up differently in this business world that we operate in. And that is just kind of, table stakes for how we have to navigate. And so I think, one of the challenges or opportunities really for me early on was finding this opportunity to stand in my confidence, even when I didn't feel hyper confident, right? Like, and I would always try to find opportunities to make myself uncomfortable because I feel like that's the only way that I can grow is if I am uncomfortable. So finding a way to stand in my power and be uncomfortable and find opportunities for growth has kind of been like a career guiding mantra for me. And that's helped push me out of, what was my comfort zone in my 20s and into a place of more confidence today. And it's helped me to kind of figure out my identity and how I want to operate as a businesswoman, as a leader with my colleagues, in this business today at Sago, and certainly with, the entities that I'm involved with outside of Sago, whether it be nonprofits or mentorship opportunities. I also think, being a woman, like we have to deal with some stuff that I don't want to say men don't deal with, because I think as I've talked about this with more people, I found that men do, encounter it, but, sexual harassment or, unwanted advances from men, women, or indifferent, like this stuff comes up and, it's certainly come up in times in my career. And I think, again, having this strong sense of self and kind of knowing how I want to show up, how I want to give back to the organization and my colleagues, it's given me this confidence to navigate through those challenging times in order to achieve my goals. And like, I just don't let go of that. And I know that there are so many people out there who deal with that too. And I have so much empathy for, for women certainly, and for men who are in that position, but never lose confidence in who you are and never lose connection to your inner voice, because both things are stronger than we could ever imagine and that we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting because to your point, it's like we can have a whole day session on the type of stigmas that women, I mean, including men too, it's all inclusive of what each of us endures, what each of us goes through. You mentioned sexual harassment. And even earlier, you had mentioned, hey, you and your husband decided that, hey, kids aren't the path that you necessarily want to go on. And that's okay. But all of those things, like we work, and they do, I think there's certain biases and perceptions that could come in. And along those lines, how did you, knowing that those things come into the workplace, how did you overcome them as these, again, I'm going to use the coconut analogy. I'm going to stick to it. As these coconuts were coming through, how did you actually deal with that? Like, what was your response of, not today, I'm going to overcome this by doing insert here? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. Starting off with, the child's free topic, because it's an interesting one. I was reading an article last night. I can't remember if it was the Journal or the Times, but it was a reader who wrote in and basically said, hey, like I've decided to live my life child free. And I find that I'm constantly in this position where I'm covering for my colleagues who have decided to, have children. And it feels like it's setting me back or putting undue work on my plate. And that hasn't necessarily been my experience, but I thought it was interesting because I think this conversation about living child free and how that shows up for men, women, and certainly in the workplace, it's a more present conversation than I've historically heard. The child free thing has been interesting for me because I I do think that there can be this assumption that I have like all of this extra time. Or that, the weird one is like, I hate kids, which is ridiculous. I don't. I love children, and I'm going to be the best aunt possible to my brother and sister's kids. But when they have them, by the way, they're super young. But, it's like, again, not allowing this societal assumption or stigma to like sway my beliefs and my convictions and how I want to live my life is something that I always come back to, because if I allowed what every person thinks of me or how people think I should live my life to like enter into my conscious and like actually penetrate how I want to show up in this world, I would constantly be jumping from one foot to the next, and I would never make any progress. And so I returned to this place of, what, Ash, like, you and your husband decided to not have children for a reason, and that is affording you opportunities. And if someone doesn't understand how to support your navigation of that, or how they should interact with you in the work world or in your personal life, it's your opportunity to educate them and also not judge them because they come from a different place. So, the child-free thing has been interesting, but it hasn't presented as too much of a problem. On the other side of things, like the unpleasant underbelly of being a woman, navigating the corporate ladder, I just think, awareness is key. Like, be aware of how you show up, be aware of how you dress, be aware of your energy, be, respectful of relationships and boundaries. And if you feel like something is off, something is probably off, and it's okay to remove yourself from that situation. And it's also okay to trust your employer and lean on them for help. Specifically, if you have a chief people officer or an HR partner, those people are there for a reason, and ideally they're your allies, and you can rely on them for support. And so I found, great confidence in, navigating challenging situations in partnership with individuals like that and getting to better outcomes.
Yeah. I think that part of it too is there's a couple things that I got out of that. Is the one that I love is trusting your gut. I feel like oftentimes we're always looking to other people, or we're questioning ourselves, and we know what's right, what's wrong. We know what feels not right. And I love that piece of it. Trust your gut. Know when something's not right. Be very aware, be respectful of boundaries. And even that piece of it is being true to yourself. If you know something doesn't work for you, that's okay. It doesn't classify you into a certain box, but it also allows you to have empathy for other people and maybe educating them. Like, I'll use going back to the kids aren't my thing, but that doesn't mean, I love what you said. It's like, hey, that doesn't mean I hate kids. I love them, but it's just not for me. And kind of knowing that piece of yourself, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because you made me think of something else, which is, like boundaries and trusting your gut. Like, I think, if I were to look back at my 20-year-old self, or even 30-year-old self, I would allow myself to get into situations because I was afraid of missing out. And I think like FOPO or JOMO, like those are such great acronyms. And like, not to say I live in this world of, JOMO, like joy of missing out. I'm trying to focus less on FOPO, right? Like the fear of people's opinions. And I think focusing again more on me and my goals and what I can control and how I want to show up in this world, regardless of the fact that people may think a certain way or that I might miss out on something. Like, it is so freeing to try to approach life that way. It takes some of the pressure out and honestly removes some of those awkward situations that I might, I might have allowed myself to walk into 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah. Okay. I learned a new acronym, because I've always had the FOMO, like the fear of missing out, which is like never a good thing, because then I'm the person that signs up for a million things. And I'm like, why am I so busy? Yeah. But FOPO, fear of people's opinions. Ooh, that one gives me the goosies.
It gives you the willies. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, that is so good. JOMO, joy of missing out. I've never heard of those, and I love them, and am now going to lean in on them. But yeah, I agree with you too, because I think it's that being true to yourself and trusting your gut, like we were discussing, because you oftentimes, it's like this perception and pressure that you end up putting on yourself, and it doesn't really lend itself to you because we think that we have to be a certain way. And I think this is really valuable. So for individuals, who are feeling like, hey, look, like I haven't wanted kids as an example. And yeah, I do want to move to the C-suite. What advice would you give them?
Do it. Don't have
Yes.
kids and start. No, kids are wonderful. That's going to be the takeaway. Everyone's going to be like, Ash hates kids. No, I think, again, like be confident in your direction. Sit down and think to yourself. And this is an exercise that I went through, a few years ago, probably more than a few years ago, when I was trying to figure out, like, how do I want to show up and how do I want to live my life? What is your filtering criteria? What brings you joy? What makes you jump out of bed every morning feeling really excited to like live this life and give your all? For me, I created filtering criteria that said three things. I want to surround myself with people, experiences, and opportunities that make me feel smart, proud, and inspired. And if it doesn't do at least one of those things, I don't want to do it. And that has provided an excellent filtering criteria for me as I think about my career progression. And so I'm not at the C-suite. I've got a ways to go. However, I can tell you that, the opportunities that I've navigated here at Sago, or even navigating over to Sago as a job opportunity that I wanted to say yes to, I took a step back and I thought to myself, okay, so Ash, you have a future goal of moving into a CRO position. That's future goal. And you know what your own mantra is, right? Smart, proud, inspired. Does this Sago opportunity give you the chance to check those three boxes on this journey that you're taking toward this CRO future goal? And thankfully, I was able to say yes to all of those boxes. And I can still say yes to checking all of those boxes today. And it makes it really gratifying and worthwhile, for me to continue on this journey. So I've gotten to a place where I try to find clarity, because if I don't find clarity, I feel like it's so easy to get lost. And energy, I believe, is just one of our scarcest resources. There's only so much of it. We can't create it. We can't destroy it. It just passes from one person to the next. So the more focused I can be, the better. And I would recommend, to the listeners that, take a step back. Think about your filtering criteria. Think about the things that make you jump out of bed and want to say yes. And if you were to take that criteria and apply it to your personal life and professional life, how might that shift how you proceed with your current decisions, and what possibilities might that open up for you that you didn't consider?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that, because there's so many things I feel like I want to go even deeper in just on that discussion alone. Podcast too, or we can try to fit it in. I want to, so we talked about earlier looking back and kind of this reflecting moment. What do you feel like were some of the defining moments or experiences that really propelled you towards this sales leadership position?
I think saying yes, even when I didn't know that yes was the right answer. It's kind of like in this vein of do the stuff that makes you really uncomfortable. So for example, like public speaking makes me wildly uncomfortable. And I knew that, moving into a sales role, I would have to get really comfortable with public speaking. I'm the kind of person who, takes those opportunities head on, and I want to put myself in a position to grow and advance. So I have been really opportunistic and said yes to things that might have otherwise made me feel really uncomfortable. And I've taken risks. I think moving into this rev ops position, there was a perceived risk that I had where, moving out of a direct seller position and a sales leadership position into a more operational, internally focused role, like would that set me back, right? Because I think a lot of times when you think about, the path to becoming a CRO, like we'll pick on my future goals. A lot of people look for, individuals who have been book carrying sales leaders. But I also know that there is a strong need for individuals who have really strong science of the sale, operational backgrounds. And when I took a step back and thought about what is this pie of Ashley's skills, and what is the piece that's missing? I thought I really need to shore up this operational piece. And so even though there might be risk in me stepping out of managing a book of business and like leading a team who's directly hitting a number, what it is going to do is it's going to allow me to bolster a part of my skill set. And quite frankly, the story that I want to tell that I know I can sell because I know my value and I know my experience and I know my worth, right? So I think it's like leaning into those kind of uncomfortable opportunities and saying yes and finding ways to advance will get you closer to that future goal.
Yeah, I feel like a theme that's also coming up in this is that if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. And so many times already you've mentioned, it's like, I love this like opportunistic path of saying yes, taking risks. But I think the other piece that I just, was so good is even like reflecting and sitting down to say, okay, for you mentioned that your goal is to move towards a CRO position and knowing what are all the skills that it takes, making yourself uncomfortable to be a presenter because you are going to have to get on a stage. So taking on some of those opportunities to bolster up those skills, to even just knowing what you have and knowing your worth to just go after and get what you want. It's some of those pieces that I think we have to be reminded that those things aren't going to fall on our lap. We have to see those windows of opportunity and then just jump through it. So
if you want it, you have to get it. You do. And, I think it's easy to sit back and want things to come to you. And sometimes people are lucky and things just come to them. I happen to not be one of those people. So, I firmly believe in creating your future and creating your success. And so, that's the world that I've lived in. And, it's challenging and hard, but gosh, like when you hit those milestones and you reach, some of those goals along the way, it feels really freaking good. And maybe that's why 40 feels good. Cause like I've hit some milestones that I wanted to hit. So I encourage people to be active participants in the story they want to tell and actually create the story.
Yeah. And the other piece I was thinking through is, and we kind of alluded to this, is like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, you sat back and you knew you wanted to be CRO and you started to develop these list of skill sets, ones that you knew you had and others that you knew you had to develop. But at what point did you discover that you wanted to be a CRO?
Such a good question. It's funny. You're making me think of a question that Sago's former CEO, Steve Schlesinger, his mom founded the company. The company used to be called Schlesinger Group. We rebranded to Sago earlier this year. When he and I were talking before I joined the company, he asked me, he said, "Hey, Ash, what do you want to do?" And I didn't know. I didn't know the answer to that question. And I kind of, fumbled through it. I was like, well, I like sales and I'm a top salesperson, but God, I don't want to be on the road all the time anymore. I'm exhausted and it strains your relationship. And I was like, oh, well, I don't think I want to do that, but I'm really good at selling and I really like client problems and solving that and transformation. And he was really funny. He said, listen, we have these opportunities like we talked about earlier on in the conversation. And let's get you on the team and we'll figure out, kind of where you go and where you evolve. And I thought that was really cool, first of all, for a CEO to do that and be open to that kind of ambiguous career pathing. However, what it provided me was the opportunity to figure out what I wanted to do. And more importantly, what I didn't want to do. Right. So over the last, 2 to 3 years at Sago, obviously I've been in this RevOps role for 1.5 years, 2 years. It's helped me refine and feel stronger conviction in what it is that I want to do. And I know that, I want to lead a company to growth. I know that I have the ability to, rally the troops and build strategic alignment and implement and execute that plan. And I've been doing that through, different things that I've been doing or that my team has been doing or that I've been doing in partnership with our leadership team. And so it's kind of helped me get to this place where I can say, yeah, okay, so CRO, it kind of feels uncomfortable, but I've also been starting to do some of the things that I need to do to get there. And so this future vision of what I want to do has come more clearly into focus. And it's been a really interesting process. I also, when I went to college, I had no clue what I wanted to declare as my major, like none, right? And I think it's probably one of the most unfair questions that we can ask kids to figure out is like, hey, 18-year-old, for your future self, like, what do you want to lock yourself into? And kudos to anyone who can do it, but it took me like 40 years to figure out what it is that I want to do. So like, don't feel pressure to know on day one. It takes a while.
It's so funny though. I felt like I had the same question. And honestly, it was a question to myself. It was like, well, Lenise, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'm like, I don't know. And it is like, I think to even ask myself, or even, as someone who's just joining college, what do you want to be? It's like, just explore, figure out what you enjoy. And what's amazing is find people who are willing to invest in you. Just like you had said, you had this leader who asked you really important questions, because it's like you're gaining all this different experience. You're in these various roles, and then having that time to just sit down and figure out, what does Ash want? What are the things that are important to you? And I feel like when someone's not just telling you, but they're asking you these really intentional questions, it makes you really sit down, and then you start it's like putting all the puzzle pieces together, where you're identifying, oh yeah, this is where I want to move to. This is where I'm really good. And I feel like those things start to kind of just come in and help you to develop this vision of knowing where you want to go.
It's interesting if I can just build on that for a sec. Yeah. You're making me think of a couple of different books and authors who I love. Tim Ferriss, if you're familiar with him, Uber podcaster, all about, life hacking, surrounding yourself with people kind of like who lift you up. And I'm totally underselling what he does, but he wrote this book called Tribe of Mentors. And I read it, and, to simplify, it's like, surround yourself with the people who represent where you want to go and who you want to become. And that was super impactful to read, and it was important. And I would encourage anyone to read it. There are just some great stories and excerpts in there. And I've been fortunate to find, a tribe of mentors and ask them hey, I think you're special for XYZ. Would you be open to helping me when I need help, or brainstorming when I need that opportunity? And people more often than not will say yes. But it's something that I think, is really important for people to think about, especially as they're progressing on this career journey or building their network or looking to shift jobs. Surround yourself with the people who represent where it is that you want to get to, and let them help you get there.
I love that. So, and I'll make sure to put in the show notes, Tribe of Mentors, Tim Ferriss. Spot on. I agree. I feel like if you're in an environment or a situation where it just feels icky, it is not your tribe. Time to find a new tribe. Time to find that tribe of people who are going to inspire you. The other piece, if I go back to a comment that you said about, the scarcest resource is energy. It's how do you protect that energy? How do you surround yourself by your tribe? As you start to reflect and think through your journey, how do you approach opportunities and making sure that you're considering, how am I optimizing my energy?
It goes back to that filtering criteria. Does it make me feel smart, proud, or inspired? And if it doesn't check at least one of those boxes, I don't want to say I totally don't do it, but I think really hard about whether or not I will do it, because I am fiercely protective of my energy. And I lead my team to think that way. And I encourage, the leaders across our business to think that way, especially in this, current economy where I think everyone is being asked to do more with less. And so I think trying to find, focus again, like we've talked about focus a couple of times. I use my filtering criteria to find that focus. I really do lean heavily on that. And I protect my time fiercely.
I think it's too, especially right now within the economy, as, situations are taking place. If people are not happy, it's making sure that you are sitting down. Don't jump into the next opportunity, because you may, without that filtering criteria in place and knowing what you want, you could be going back into a worse situation, if anything. And I would love to hear from you. What was your experience when you pursued opportunities without using that filtering criteria? What ended up taking place?
What ended up taking place? I don't want to give you a politician's answer, but I think so. I've had the benefit of being with, current and previous employers for a while. So I've been with Sago for over 3 years. I was with my previous employer for 10 years. And so it's been less about finding like a new employer and more about finding my way to new opportunities within my existing employer. And so that's kind of, I think, taken some of the pressure off of trying to figure out like, okay, like where else do I want to jump to? But I do think like if you wanted to apply, whatever filtering criteria it is, after you take a step back, reflect on your life, figure out how you want to live it and where you want to get to, it can help you navigate internally and externally. Same page for sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And this has been such a good discussion because I think there's so many nuggets of being uncomfortable to grow, making sure that you have your tribe of mentors. If we start going into more of the professional development side of the house, what resources, in addition to what we've discussed, have played a significant role in just helping you to step into this leadership positions, helping you to step into your power?
Yeah. So I, in addition to reading a lot, so we talked about Tim Ferriss. I listen to a ton of podcasts. So new links to add to the show notes.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of Dr. Michael Gervais and his Finding Mastery podcast. And he has authored a couple of books. He's actually the one who came up with FOPO, and he has a book coming out in a couple of months talking about, fear of people's opinions and how that can impact you and how to push through it. So big fan of his. I've also, looked intentionally to build my network. So Women in Revenue, that's how we found one another, finding opportunities to network and connect with like-minded individuals and also those individuals who represent where I want to go. That has provided an excellent, professional development opportunity for myself. I would say just generally be curious and be proactive. If you're curious about something or if you're interested in, a different line of work or a specialty that doesn't represent what you're doing today, and like you're curious, should I even, think about considering that? Like Google it, see who's doing it, see if you can talk to someone, who is currently, in that line of work or whatever it is. Like be curious and take action. That is how I found success in, navigating through my career. And I think it's just the straightest path to where I want to get to. Be curious, take action, make it happen.
Yeah, no, I love that. There's so many good nuggets. Like I told you, the new acronyms that I had not heard of, the new podcasts I will now be adding, as well as my Amazon list of books that I continue to add on to. I think all of these are really good nuggets. And even to your last point of always be curious. And I would even take it back a couple of minutes of what we were just talking about is saying yes. Getting yourself exposed and taking those risks. I think those are massively valuable resources that, everybody should really lean into. Now, the other piece I feel like of kind of going into this like leadership position, and it's like stepping into your power and knowing and having your voice, because there are ways or maybe opportunities where you have to assert certain assertiveness, but then you have to make sure you're being calm and, just balancing those things together. Can you talk to us more about how do you balance like being assertive? I mean, we talk about all these resources and discovery sessions, but then now when you're in actual practice, how do you balance that assertiveness and maintaining a calm yet objective approach as you're stepping into this position?
Love this question, especially for women. So I have found success in objectivity and facts. Objectivity is great because it removes emotion from the situation or conversation, which is really hard to do. And I think oftentimes as women, we're perceived as and do show up sometimes as very emotional. And I think, when you're negotiating salary or, trying to sell to a client or sell to the C-suite or a board or, prove why you should be in a room, being objective and fact-based and data-based is such a great way to strip away the question and any reason someone would have to doubt you. That then lends itself to, I believe, being able to show up confidently, because if you're objective and you're showing up with a point of view that's based in data and steeped in fact, there's not much left to question. And that has helped me feel more confident, when I've been in those situations.
Oh, I love that. Well, and I think, I know for myself, I can get really wrapped up if someone objects to an opinion or maybe something that I'm trying to articulate. It's removing those emotions. I think those emotions are valid. Not everyone needs to see them though. And I think that it's okay to feel how you feel, but when you are, whether it's presenting to the board or you're presenting to your executive leadership team, coming with facts help to articulate the case that you're trying to make. And I think it also builds confidence. It builds trust. Because in many ways, I mean, sure, you can argue with logic, but can you? I don't know.
But can you? And listen, anyone can do anything, right? Like at the end of the day, I try to focus on like what is within my sphere or realm of control. But it like goes back to this notion of confidence. If I'm going into a salary negotiation, for example, I know my performance. I know, the range of where I need to be based on data. And I know that my employer has hired me, presumably, for a reason to do a job that I'm doing really well at, right? And so if like those things hold true, then it makes the conversation very easy. And I'm not talking about a, current salary negotiation with Sago, but I think, when it comes to compensation negotiating or navigating your way through challenging situations or presentation or whatever it is, the more objectively we can show up and be data-based, I think the better. And it doesn't mean that we need to like lack emotion or be void of emotion. Yeah. I'm clearly a super expressive person, and I know that I don't have a poker face, but I know in those moments where, I need to show up with conviction and, like get to the place that I need to get to. That's where I found success in navigating to the place I want to achieve or the thing I want to achieve.
Yeah. Have an objective approach, do your research, bet on yourself, and that conversation will flow. And I think it makes it a really strong conversation in wherever you're taking it. My last question that I had for you as we start to wrap up, Ash, is, in a world full of possibilities, what mark do you dream of leaving as a trailblazer for future generations of empowered women?
Oh, so good. I love it. Yeah. My focus, and I think about this word legacy, when you ask the question, like what mark do you want to leave? What legacy do you want to leave? I want to leave the room better than I found it. And whether that room is the literal room that we're sitting in, or the virtual room that we're sitting in, or, my company, how I leave a meeting, how I leave this world. I personally want to leave people feeling better from having interacted with me, than they would have if they hadn't. And, that is my focus, and that is something that I can control. And so that's kind of what I think about when you ask the question. I love it.
Yeah. No, well, and I love that answer because it is, it's focusing on what you can control and making sure that you're going to leave your mark of making sure everyone feels confident and comfortable and empowered, to make a difference. And this conversation has been amazing, Ash. I appreciate you. I see why now we've gotten along so well because we're both very expressive and open. And just thank you so much for sharing your story with us. As we wrap up in today's session, let's remember that in supporting one another, we amplify our strengths and we break down barriers. So go out there, champion your dreams, empower your peers, and continue to shape a future where every woman realizes her true potential. Until next time, see ya.